Hey youth! Today we're going to talk about our final survival tip to help you make it through your teenage years. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Do me a favor, grab your school ID or your driver's license. I've got mine right here. What does that card say about you? It probably has your name, your school, maybe even your grade. And of course, your ID has a picture of you. But does your ID define who you are? I mean, how are you supposed to know this is even me? Your ID does not tell us the whole story about you or any of the wonderful qualities that you have. So if this doesn't define us, what does? Or what makes us unique? Is it what your friends think about you? Maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend, parents, or what you think about you? It's none of those things. What really defines us is our third and final survival tip. Let God define you. I want you to understand that your value does not come from what others think about you. It comes from what God thinks about you. By the end of small group, I hope that you understand that God's thoughts about you matter more than what anyone else thinks about you. Let me share a couple Bible verses with you. Psalm 139, 13 through 14 says, "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." Let's think about what these verses are saying. God knew you before you were even born. God made each part of you. He determined your personality, your features, everything about you that makes you, you. Take a look at this picture. Look at that baby in there. I can't tell you a lot about it just from the picture. I can see a head, a nose, but I can't even tell what gender it is. But God knows this little baby. He formed and created them, and He loves them. God formed and created you, and He loves you too. He was thoughtful in creating you because of His love for you. In fact, He loves you more than any person possibly could. I mean, God didn't just make you up on the spot. He didn't plan you when your parents did. The Bible says that before the foundations of the world, God decided to create you. So God has known you and loved you for a very long time. This is why we should let God define us, because He made us to know Him. So if we're going to let God define us, we need to know what matters to Him. And here's what we find. God looks at the heart. How do you and your friends tend to define people? How do you decide whether to be their friend or not? If you're like most people, you probably define them by the way they look. Maybe if they're pretty, what they dress like, or if you find them funny. But God doesn't care about any of that. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, 'Don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him.' The Lord doesn't see the things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." In this verse, Samuel's trying to figure out who the next king of Israel is going to be. He sees this tall, handsome man and assumes that's who God has chosen. But God tells us He cares more about a person's heart than what they look like on the outside. God judges us on whether or not we listen to Him and whether we believe in Jesus. If you let God define you, you're going to try and do what pleases Him, and that's the most important thing you can do with your life. But you need to know that God's love for you is not based on how well you follow Him. God doesn't accept you because of what you can do for Him. He accepts you when you believe in Jesus. So let's say you're a Christian. How exactly does God define you? As a Christian, you are a new creation. Becoming a Christian is a radical transformation for your life. And God says the transformation is so great that you become a new person, whether you feel new or not. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun." This verse means that when God looks at you, He doesn't see your faults, He sees Jesus. This is great news. You don't have to work for God's approval. You already have it. Maybe you feel like you're constantly searching for approval, maybe from your friends, your parents, and when you live for the approval of others, you're bound to make bad choices, ones you wouldn't normally make. But the good news is, if you're a Christian, God accepts you as you are. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not for God. You can be yourself. We still want to please God, but we don't do this to get Him to like us. We do this because we love Him. God already loves us and accepts us through Jesus, and there's wonderful security in knowing that. So, those are our 3 survival tips. Put God first, respect your parents, and let God define you. We want you to use these tips throughout your teenage years and the rest of your life. It's always going to be hard to be a teenager, but if you listen to God during these years, you really can thrive.